Today on Better Book Clubs, a check-in on how I'm doing with my reading goals for 2023. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I usually set myself some reading goals for the year. And it's not a page count goal or a number of books goal, but rather a list of the kinds of books that I want to read in the year so that I diversify my reading. And I make sure that I'm not kind of stuck in a rut in terms of what I'm reading. So usually what I do is I set my goals and then I just go off and read whatever I feel like reading. And at some point during the year, usually over the summer, I check in and I just see how I'm doing and kind of make a course correction if I'm missing some things. And so today I want to talk specifically about the categories that I've missed so far that I do want to read in by the end of this year. And also, interestingly, there are some categories that I've read a lot in. So I kind of have an unbalanced portfolio right now of books that I've read this year. And it's kind of interesting to see what's happened because one of them in particular is a little bit of a course correction from past years. So the first category is a classic I haven't read before. And I've actually read 3 of those this year, although that's kind of odd because I thought I had only read 2 because I thought I had read 1984 before, and yet as I started to read, I was like, yeah, none of this is familiar. So I don't think I did read 1984 before. I think that was a brand new read for me. So was Elizabeth Gaskell's novel Cranford, and I think I'll throw in there also, because it's kind of a classic. It's a little cute little book by Nathaniel Hawthorne called 20 Days with Julian and Little Bunny, which is a chronicle of the 20 days that he was in charge of his little son while his wife was away. And then I also reread To the Lighthouse, but the category was a classic I haven't read before. And at the end of this year, when I do my roundup of 2023, I'll talk a little bit more about some of these books. But there are some other categories as well that I've read in that I had set as goals for this year. One of them is poetry, but I haven't read a complete collection yet this year. I've just kind of been dabbling in poetry. So I probably would like to work on that a little bit more. And then I had a category of science fiction, which is not something that I normally read in. And I would put 1984 in that category, but also Ted Chiang's collection Exhalation, which I haven't finished, but I've been reading it one story at a time, and I'll probably finish that by the end of the year. In any case, I've been reading some science fiction a little bit. I had a goal to read prize-winning nonfiction this year, and I did read a really interesting book called Say Nothing that won the 2019 National Book Critics Circle Award, and it's about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I learned a lot from that, so that was a great choice. But also, interestingly, I've read an unusual number for me of prize-winning fiction books as well. That's unusual for me because in the past I've been kind of slow to pick up newer books. I tended to read books that were a few years old or even older. I've gotten better this year, even though it wasn't one of my stated goals, at reading some more really pretty recent fiction. And I'm going to talk some more about that in a video later because there's a reason why that's happening. The prize-winning fiction I've read, which again was not really something that I set out to do, but I have been doing more this year, includes Great Circle, The Overstory, The Marriage Portrait, The Colony, The Vanishing Half. So quite a few of the novels that I've read this year fall into that prize-winning fiction category. And then finally, there's a category that I've been trying really hard to read more in, and I'm finally having a little bit of success this year, although it's still not, like, I'm really not quite finding what I was looking for, and that's in the category of humor. So this year I read 2 nonfiction books so far that turned out to be funny, but I don't think they've been shelved in humor. That's not really their primary goal. One of them is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, and it's a series of essays where he's just kind of like ruminating on or meditating on stuff from the human era, which is the Anthropocene. He has a really great voice. He's very funny. I laughed out loud quite a few times as I was reading that book. Actually, I listened to most of it on audio. And the other one that wasn't really intended to be a humor book, but was funny, again, laugh out loud funny a number of times, was a book on moral philosophy, but moral philosophy for people who really don't know anything about moral philosophy, that was written by Michael Schur, who was the creator of the TV show The Good Place. And so if you've ever seen The Good Place, you know what I'm talking about. And he does reference the TV show at times, and actually in the audio, some of the actors from The Good Place are reading sections of the book. So the title of that book is How to Be Perfect. And you can tell from the title, obviously, that he's taking a humorous tone towards this, but How to Be Perfect, and then the subtitle is The Correct Answer to Every Moral Question. And I also read a novel this summer called Tracy Flick Can't Win by Tom Perrotta. And if you know the story Election by Tom Perrotta, this is a follow-up to it, and I understand that there's going to be a movie of this one as well, starring Reese Witherspoon, who starred in the movie Election, I think back in the 90s. At least that's when the novel came out. And that also, I knew when I picked that up that that was going to be a comic novel. I really enjoyed it. It was really great light summer reading. So I've had a little bit more success with humor this year than I have in the past. But what I really want to focus on today is the categories that so far I'm falling short on. And I want to talk about what I'm going to do about that. So I'm making this video on Labor Day weekend. And so I have September, October, November, December to catch up with my own list and try to meet all of my goals for the year. So the first goal that I'm missing so far is to read a contemporary book in translation. And by contemporary, I mean not Tolstoy, but a book that's come out maybe in the past 10 years that was originally not written in English. And the fact is that those books can be pretty hard to find unless they're like huge bestsellers. So I'm thinking about, for example, Stieg Larsson's series, like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and so forth. So if you have a really good independent bookstore, they might have a section of books in translation. I have to go more intentionally looking for this book, whatever it might be this year for me. So that's one thing I'm hoping to accomplish in this fall into the winter before the end of the year. And I'll let you know at the end of the year whether I found something and enjoyed it and what that book is. Another category, which I'm kind of embarrassed to admit because I'm a real evangelist for these kinds of books, is books that are published by small presses. I've talked about this before. I really want to be a small press booster and let people know that the small presses are out there. So by small press, I mean university presses, or not part of the big five, which now since Simon & Schuster is sold, I don't know, I haven't heard anybody call it this yet, but maybe we're down to the big four. But those major New York City publishing houses that kind of suck all the air out of the room unless some little book from a small press happens to break through. And again, just as with books in translation, you kind of have to go out and look for them yourself to some extent if you want to read them. Now at this point in the year when I'm kind of going back over my list, I'm realizing I'm gonna have to make more of a concerted effort to go out and find some small press books that I'm gonna read this fall. So that is also still unfulfilled on my list and something I have to work on and something I'll give you an update about in a few months. So then there's a third category that I've missed so far that in some ways I think is the most interesting category because it's a category that doesn't even exist some years. And that is the category, the book that everyone's talking about. So some years, there's just a book that everybody seems to talk about. And no matter where you go, somebody's read it, somebody's recommending it. You keep kind of stumbling across it. And I think we have that book this year. It's Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. First of all, I know this book is popular because so many people have talked about it and encouraged me to read it. Every bookstore I go into seems to have a display that includes it, and actually it's still only in hardcover, so that's one reason why I've been like, oh, wait, it's gonna come out in paperback soon. But we were at one of our favorite independent bookstores a couple of weeks ago, RJ Julia in Madison, Connecticut, and we asked, And they looked it up and told us that it's not due out in paper book until April of 2024. So at that point I was like, okay, I'm just gonna have to bite the bullet and get a hardcover copy of this book. You know, I don't mind buying hardcovers and supporting authors, but I can't do it very often because they're pretty expensive. I'm thinking, okay, that's the book that I have to read that everybody's talking about. But here's the catch. What I really want to do is read David Copperfield first. As you can tell from the title, Demon Copperhead is kind of a takeoff on the title David Copperfield. And if you're not familiar with David Copperfield, it's a classic novel by Charles Dickens. It's one of those long Dickens novels. And everybody I ask who's read Demon Copperhead has said you don't have to read David Copperfield in order to appreciate it at all. But I'm feeling kind of stubborn about this. So like, I know I would enjoy Barbara Kingsolver's novel regardless, but I feel like if I were to read David Copperfield first, which is a classic novel that I've never read before, I would see things that I wouldn't see otherwise. And I think it would enrich the experience. So I'm sure it's true that I could read Demon Copperhead and enjoy it, but I really want to read David Copperfield first. So I have a copy of David Copperfield, which I have not started yet. And you'll see this is an older edition. It happens to be part of a collection of Charles Dickens novels that I have because my grandfather bought them from a traveling book salesman on the train commuting into New York City. I think it was like once a month the salesman would come through the car selling these books. And of course the idea was they were part of a series, so you'd be, once you had bought a couple of them, you would be like, okay, I should buy some more so I have the whole series. And so that's what my grandfather did. I've never checked to see if it's a totally complete set, but there must be, I don't know, about 20 copies, 20 editions of, you know, different Dickens novels in the collection. And some of them are more worn than the others. The copy of A Christmas Carol is the most well-worn book in the series. But I've even got my grandfather's book plate in here, and it's dated 1936, and it has his name. This is a pretty long book. It's 850 pages long. The type isn't too small, but you know, it's small enough. This is a little bit daunting, but I'm gonna give it a shot. And so if you check back in at the end of the year when I post my roundup video, you'll find out whether I was able to read both David Copperfield and Demon Copperhead by the end of the year. This might be all I read for the rest of the year. I might have to throw my other two goals out the window in order to accomplish this, but we'll see. I don't know. You know, if I really devote some time to it, I might be able to do it. And I will say that I'm not gonna read this if I'm not enjoying it. So that's the update, the kind of check-in on my 2023 reading goals. Again, I'll circle back around at the end of the year and let you know how I did, what I found, and I'll also spend a little bit more time then talking about of the books that I read this year, the ones that really stood out for me, regardless of what category they're in. So I hope this inspires you to think about the diversity of your reading habits, and maybe even though it's already, you know, 2/3 of the way through the year, to think about what you might want to set as some goals for your reading this fall in order to read in some areas that are maybe less likely to just sort of fall into your lap or accidentally happen. Think about what you might like to read and let me know in the comments section below what your reading goals are for the rest of the year. If you like this video, please subscribe, and I'll be back soon with another episode of Better Book Clubs.